Close your eyes for a moment and let this settle in. The world is loud right now. Everyone is talking. Everyone is proving. Everyone is competing to be seen, heard, validated. And somehow, in all this noise, most people feel more invisible than ever. You don't need more motivation. You don't need another burst of energy that fades by tomorrow morning. What you need is clarity. This video is not here to excite you. It's here to steady you, to reset the way you move through people, conversations, work, and life itself. What you're about to hear isn't new. In fact, it's old, almost a century old. And that's exactly why it works. Dale Carnegie didn't teach people how to dominate rooms. He taught them how to quietly win them. He didn't promise overnight success. He showed how small, invisible shifts in behavior compound into influence, respect, and confidence over time. This is not about becoming louder. It's about becoming unavoidable. In 2026, the people who win won't be the ones with the sharpest words or the strongest opinions. They'll be the ones who understand human nature better than everyone else. The ones who listen when others interrupt. The ones who remain calm when others react. The ones who make people feel understood in a world obsessed with being right. So as this begins, don't rush it. Let it play while you walk. While you sit alone at night. While the world slows down. This is a long conversation. One principle at a time. One shift at a time. And by the end, you won't feel pumped. You'll feel grounded. There is a mistake almost everyone makes when they think about success. They assume it belongs to the most talented, or the smartest, or the most aggressive. Dale Carnegie saw something different. He noticed that people who rose, socially, professionally, financially, were rarely the ones who tried the hardest to impress. They were the ones who understood something subtle but powerful. People don't respond to brilliance the way they respond to understanding. Most people walk into conversations thinking, how do I sound? Carnegie asked a better question. How do they feel? This is the quiet advantage. When you make someone feel important, genuinely, without manipulation, you lower their defenses. And when defenses drop, influence begins. Not force, not pressure, influence. In 2026, this matters more than ever. People are exhausted, emotionally overloaded, constantly compared, constantly judged. The average person walks around with invisible tension in their chest. They don't need someone to outshine them. They need someone who makes them feel at ease. Carnegie understood that confidence is not something you display. It's something others experience around you. That's why the first principle is uncomfortable for most people. Stop criticizing. Stop condemning. Stop complaining. Not because criticism is always wrong, but because it almost never produces the result you want. When you criticize someone, their mind doesn't open. Closes. Instantly. Even if you're right. Even if your logic is flawless. Even if the facts are on your side. The human ego does not negotiate under attack. Think about how you react when someone points out your flaws. Even gently, even correctly. Your first instinct isn't growth. It's defense, justification, explanation. Carnegie wasn't naive about human nature. He was realistic. He knew that if you want long-term influence, you must work with the ego, not against it. This doesn't mean becoming passive. It means becoming strategic. The people who win in the long run are not the ones who correct everyone. They are the ones people feel safe around. Safe enough to reflect. Safe enough to change. There's a reason truly powerful people rarely argue. They don't need to. They understand that winning an argument often means losing a relationship, an opportunity, or a future alliance you didn't even know existed. In 2026, your reputation will be built less on what you say and more on how you make others feel after speaking to you. Ask yourself this honestly. When people leave a conversation with you, do they feel lighter or smaller? Carnegie taught that appreciation is a stronger motivator than criticism will ever be. But here's the part most people miss. Appreciation must be specific and sincere. Not flattery. Not exaggeration. Not manipulation. People can sense fake praise immediately. It repels instead of attracts. Real appreciation requires attention. It means noticing effort, progress, intention, And that requires you to slow down, something most people are unwilling to do. But that unwillingness is your advantage. When you listen without planning your response, when you acknowledge someone's effort instead of correcting their mistake, when you let others finish their thoughts without interrupting, you separate yourself from 90% of the population. This is not weakness, it's discipline. Carnegie believed self-control was the foundation of respect. Anyone can react. Few can remain composed. And composition is magnetic. Think about the people you respect most. They're rarely frantic, rarely desperate to be heard. They move with a kind of internal quiet. That quiet comes from understanding people instead of fighting them. Part 1 ends with this truth. You don't need to dominate people to move ahead. You need to understand them better than they understand themselves. And that begins not with speaking, but with restraint. Most people believe they are good listeners. They're not. They are simply waiting for their turn to speak. Dale Carnegie noticed this long before social media, before phones, before constant distraction. Even then, people were mentally rehearsing replies instead of actually hearing what was being said. Listening, real listening, is not passive. It's one of the most active forms of discipline there is. When you listen properly, you silence your ego. And the ego does not like being silenced. It wants to interrupt. It wants to correct. It wants to prove relevance. But here is the truth Carnegie understood deeply. People don't care how much you know until they feel understood. In 2026, this truth becomes a weapon, if you know how to use it ethically. Think about the last conversation you had where someone truly listened to you. No interruptions. No quick judgments. No redirecting the topic back to themselves. You probably remember how it felt. That feeling is influence. Not manipulation. Not persuasion. Influence. Carnegie taught that listening is the fastest way to make someone feel important. And when someone feels important around you, they associate that feeling with you. This is how trust forms without effort. Most people sabotage themselves by trying to be interesting. Carnegie advised something far more effective. Be interested instead. Interest requires presence. Presence requires restraint. When you ask someone about their work, their struggles, their ideas, and then actually stay with their answer, you give them something rare. Attention without agenda. And attention is the new currency. In meetings, the person who listens becomes the person everyone turns to. In relationships, the listener becomes the emotional anchor. In negotiations, the listener gains leverage without force. Because while others are talking, the listener is learning. Carnegie also warned about a subtle trap. Listening is not silence alone. It's engagement without domination. A nod, a brief acknowledgement, a thoughtful follow-up question. These signals tell the other person, I'm here. I'm with you. This does something powerful. It lowers their need to impress. And when people stop trying to impress, they start telling the truth. Truth is where insight lives. Most opportunities don't arrive announced. They reveal themselves in conversation to those paying attention. Another principle Carnegie emphasized was this: never interrupt someone to correct them, even when they're wrong, especially when they're wrong. Correction triggers defense. Defense kills openness. Once openness is gone, influence is over. This doesn't mean you agree with everything. It means you understand timing. Wisdom knows when to speak. Power knows when not to. There is a quiet confidence in letting someone finish, even when you already know where they're going. That confidence is felt immediately. People sense when you're not threatened by being silent. And silence, when paired with attentiveness, becomes commanding. In 2026, attention spans are fractured. People are half-present everywhere. So when you give someone full presence, it feels almost shocking. They lean in. They open up. They remember you. Carnegie believed that names mattered deeply, not as a trick, but as recognition. A person's name is tied to their identity. Remembering it signals respect. But again, sincerity matters. Using someone's name without warmth feels mechanical. Using it with presence feels personal. Everything comes back to this. People want to feel seen, not studied. Listening is how you see them. And here's the part most people overlook. Listening also changes you. When you stop rushing to speak, your mind becomes clearer. Your emotions settle. Your reactions soften. You begin responding instead of reacting. That composure becomes part of your identity. Others start to describe you as grounded, calm, easy to talk to. These aren't small compliments. They're signals of trust. Carnegie didn't teach charisma as performance. He taught it as presence. In a world addicted to expression, restraint becomes rare, and rarity creates value. So as this part closes, hold on to this idea. You don't need sharper words. You need deeper attention. Listening is not about being quiet. It's about being available. In the next part, we'll explore why arguing feels productive, but quietly destroys opportunity, and how Carnegie's approach to disagreement keeps doors open while others slam them shut. For now, notice how often you feel the urge to interrupt. That urge is not confidence. It's insecurity asking to be fed. Let it pass. And stay present. There is a quiet addiction most people don't recognize. The need to be right. It shows up in conversations disguised as logic, in debates framed as intelligence, in corrections justified as honesty. Dale Carnegie understood that this impulse, while natural, is one of the most expensive habits a person can have. Because every time you prove someone wrong, you may gain a point, but you lose something far more valuable: goodwill. When someone realizes they are wrong because of you, their ego doesn't thank you. It resents you, even if they never say it, even if they smile and nod. Internally, something shifts. They stop seeing you as an ally and start seeing you as a threat. Carnegie wasn't against truth. He was against unnecessary friction. He noticed that arguments rarely change minds. They harden positions. The human mind, when challenged publicly, becomes a fortress. Logic stops entering. Defense takes over. This is why debates feel satisfying but accomplish so little. Winning an argument is often the fastest way to lose influence. In 2026, this matters more than ever. People broadcast opinions constantly. Identities are wrapped around beliefs. When you challenge a belief, you're no longer debating an idea, you're threatening a sense of self. Carnegie advised something counterintuitive. Let the other person save face. Not because they deserve it, but because progress requires it. If someone feels humiliated, they will not move forward with you. They may comply outwardly, but internally, resistance remains. True persuasion works invisibly. Carnegie suggested that when disagreement is necessary, it should begin with humility. Phrases like, "I may be mistaken. I've thought about this from another angle. Let me understand your view first." These aren't weak. They are strategic. They signal openness. And openness invites openness in return. Most people rush to conclusions because they want closure. But closure achieved through force creates silent opposition. Closure achieved through understanding creates alignment. Carnegie believed that people change their minds best when they believe the idea was partly theirs. When you allow someone to arrive at a conclusion rather than pushing them toward it, they defend the outcome instead of resisting it. This requires patience. And patience is a form of power. Think about the most influential people you've met. They rarely announce their superiority. They guide conversations. They plant ideas. They let silence do some of the work. Silence gives people space to think. Thinking leads to ownership. Ownership leads to action. In 2026, with attention spans shrinking, the person who can remain composed in disagreement stands out immediately. While others escalate, you de-escalate. While others insist, you inquire. While others react, you observe. This creates an imbalance, not of dominance, but of stability. People instinctively gravitate toward the stable one. Carnegie also warned against a subtle mistake. Sarcasm feels clever. It lands fast, and it corrodes trust quietly. Sarcasm makes people feel small without giving them a chance to respond. There is a pressure most people live under without realizing it. The pressure to impress. It shapes how they speak, how they dress, how they present their achievements, how they exaggerate certainty even when they feel unsure. Dale Carnegie noticed something subtle. The more someone tries to impress, the less impressive they become. Not immediately, but over time, because impressing requires performance. And performance is exhausting. People who perform are constantly monitoring themselves, how they sound, how they're perceived, whether they're winning approval. That constant self-awareness fragments presence. And presence is where confidence actually lives. Carnegie taught that real confidence doesn't announce itself. It reveals itself through ease. Ease in conversation. Ease in silence. Ease in uncertainty. When someone is comfortable not proving themselves, others feel it instantly. This is why people who brag repel more than they attract. Not because success is unattractive, but because insecurity leaks through the performance. In 2026, this is especially relevant. Social media has trained people to curate their identity, to highlight outcomes while hiding process, to turn life into a presentation. But in real interactions, presentation creates distance. Authenticity creates connection. Carnegie believed that the ego's need to impress often comes from fear of being overlooked, underestimated, or forgotten. Ironically, that fear produces the very behavior that makes people tune out. The antidote is simple but difficult: shift attention outward. When you focus on making the other person comfortable instead of impressive yourself, the dynamic flips. You stop performing. They stop evaluating. The interaction relaxes. Carnegie emphasized that talking about yourself excessively is rarely received as confidence. It's received as noise. People are most engaged when the conversation revolves around what matters to them. Their interests, their challenges, their goals. This doesn't mean erasing yourself. It means choosing relevance over validation. There is also a quiet strength in admitting you don't know something. Most people think uncertainty weakens authority. In reality, forced certainty destroys it. When you acknowledge limits, you signal honesty. And honesty builds trust faster than polished answers ever will. Carnegie observed that people who pretend to know everything create tension. People feel tested around them. Conversations become guarded. But when someone is comfortable saying, "I'm not sure," it gives others permission to be human too. That permission is powerful. In 2026, competence will matter, but character will matter more. People will choose to work with, trust, and support those who feel stable rather than those who feel impressive. There's another layer to this: comparison. Trying to impress is often fueled by comparison, measuring yourself against others in the room. Carnegie believed comparison was a thief not just of joy, but of influence. Because when you're busy measuring, you're not connecting. Comparison pulls your attention inward. Connection requires attention outward. The most respected people aren't constantly checking where they stand. They're grounded in who they are. That grounding creates consistency, and consistency creates trust. As this part ends, consider this quietly. When you enter a room, do you arrive with the goal of being noticed or of being useful? Usefulness outlasts admiration. Calm outlasts flash. Presence outlasts performance. In the next part, we'll explore how genuine appreciation, done correctly, can change behavior more effectively than pressure, authority, or persuasion. For now, release the need to impress. Confidence grows when it's no longer being forced. Most people believe that authority creates results. That if you push harder, demand more, or raise your voice, things will improve. Dale Carnegie saw the opposite. He observed that pressure may create compliance, but it rarely creates commitment. People may obey, but they don't invest themselves. And without investment, progress stalls the moment supervision disappears. Appreciation works differently. It doesn't force behavior. It invites it. Carnegie understood that beneath every role, employee, student, partner, leader, is the same human desire: to feel valued. Not flattered, not indulged, valued. There's a difference. Flattery feels hollow because it's exaggerated and unfocused. Appreciation feels grounding because it's specific and earned. When someone feels genuinely appreciated, something subtle happens inside them. Their resistance lowers. Their motivation shifts from obligation to pride. They want to do better, not to avoid punishment, but to live up to the recognition they've received. This is why appreciation is one of the most underused tools in modern life. It requires attentiveness. It requires patience. It requires setting your ego aside long enough to notice effort in others. Most people are too busy managing themselves to see anyone else clearly. In 2026, this becomes an advantage. People are increasingly managed by systems, metrics, and deadlines, rarely by understanding. So when someone notices their effort, not just the outcome, it stands out. Carnegie emphasized that appreciation must focus on effort, intention, and improvement, not just results. Results fluctuate. Effort reveals character. When you acknowledge effort, you reinforce identity. And identity is far more powerful than instruction. Telling someone what to do may change a task. Helping them believe who they are changes a trajectory. Carnegie also warned that appreciation must never be used as leverage. The moment it becomes a tool for manipulation, people sense it. Sincere appreciation has no urgency, no demand, no expectation attached. It's offered and released. That's why it works. In contrast, criticism, even when justified, creates emotional debt. The person may comply, but internally they keep score. Over time, that score turns into disengagement. Appreciation creates the opposite effect. It builds emotional credit. When correction is later needed, it lands on fertile ground instead of hardened soil. This is why truly effective leaders correct less often, but are listened to more. They don't need to repeat themselves. Their words carry weight because they've built goodwill over time. In daily life, this principle applies everywhere. In families, in friendships, in work environments, even in brief interactions. People don't remember instructions as much as they remember how they were treated while receiving them. Carnegie believed that appreciation also reshapes the person who gives it. When you look for effort instead of error, your perception changes. You become less reactive, less critical, more composed. This composure feeds back into your confidence. You're no longer scanning for flaws. You're observing growth. That shift alone changes how others experience you. There's another layer here. Appreciation creates alignment without confrontation. When someone feels seen, they naturally want to align with the person who saw them. Not out of obligation, but out of respect. Respect is voluntary. Compliance is temporary. In 2026, voluntary respect will matter more than positional authority. Hierarchies are flattening. Influence is becoming relational. People don't ask, who's in charge? They ask, who understands me? And appreciation is the language of understanding. This doesn't mean avoiding standards. Carnegie was clear about that. Standards matter. Expectations matter. But how those standards are reinforced determines whether people grow or withdraw. Recognition fuels responsibility. Sincere appreciation has no urgency, no demand, no expectation attached. It's offered and released. That's why it works. In contrast, criticism, even when justified, creates emotional debt. The person may comply, but internally they keep score. Over time, that score turns into disengagement. Appreciation creates the opposite effect. It builds emotional credit. When correction is later needed, it lands on fertile ground instead of hardened soil. This is why truly effective leaders correct less often, but are listened to more. They don't need to repeat themselves. Their words carry weight because they've built goodwill over time. In daily life, this principle applies everywhere. In families, in friendships, in work environments, even in brief interactions. People don't remember instructions as much as they remember how they were treated while receiving them. Carnegie believed that appreciation also reshapes the person who gives it. When you look for effort instead of error, your perception changes. You become less reactive, less critical, more composed. This composure feeds back into your confidence. You're no longer scanning for flaws. You're observing growth. That shift alone changes how others experience you. There's another layer here. Appreciation creates alignment without confrontation. When someone feels seen, they naturally want to align with the person who saw them. Not out of obligation, but out of respect. Respect is voluntary. Compliance is temporary. In 2026, Voluntary respect will matter more than positional authority. Hierarchies are flattening. Influence is becoming relational. People don't ask, who's in charge? They ask, who understands me? And appreciation is the language of understanding. This doesn't mean avoiding standards. Carnegie was clear about that. Standards matter. Expectations matter. But how those standards are reinforced determines whether people grow or withdraw. Recognition fuels responsibility. When people feel trusted, they act more responsibly. When they feel dismissed, they disengage. As this part closes, reflect on this quietly. When was the last time you acknowledged someone's effort without adding advice, correction, or expectation? That moment probably lingered for them longer than you think. In the next part, we'll move into a different dimension entirely. How calm self-control, especially under pressure, becomes a form of silent authority that others instinctively follow. For now, remember this: people don't rise to demands. They rise to dignity. And appreciation is how dignity is expressed. Most people believe confidence is visible. They look for it in posture, volume, decisiveness, certainty. Dale Carnegie understood something quieter. The most convincing confidence is invisible. It reveals itself through self-control. Anyone can react. Anyone can raise their voice. Anyone can defend themselves. Very few people can pause. That pause, the space between stimulus and response, is where power lives. Carnegie noticed that people who lacked self-control were often intelligent, capable, even talented. But under pressure, they collapsed into emotion. And once emotion took over, judgment followed. In 2026, this weakness is amplified. Messages arrive instantly. Opinions are public. Reactions are rewarded. Outrage travels faster than restraint. The person who remains composed immediately stands apart. Composure is not suppression. It's regulation. It's the ability to experience emotion without allowing it to dictate behavior. When someone maintains calm under pressure, others instinctively defer to them. Not because of fear, but because stability feels safe. Carnegie believed people look for anchors in moments of uncertainty. The calm individual becomes that anchor without saying a word. This is why leaders are often quieter than expected. They don't rush to comment. They don't rush to correct. They don't rush to defend their image. They allow situations to unfold while maintaining internal balance. That balance communicates confidence more clearly than any declaration ever could. Self-control also protects your reputation. A single emotional outburst can undo years of credibility. Not because people are unforgiving, but because they remember instability. Carnegie warned that losing control, even briefly, signals unpredictability. And unpredictability erodes trust. In professional environments, people don't promote the most emotional person. They promote the most reliable one. Reliability is emotional consistency over time. This doesn't mean becoming cold. It means becoming selective. Selective about where you invest emotional energy. Selective about what deserves a response. Selective about which battles matter. Carnegie emphasized that restraint is not passive. It's intentional. Choosing not to react is still a decision, often the strongest one available. Think about how many situations escalate unnecessarily because someone felt the need to respond immediately. Immediate responses feel satisfying. They also remove leverage. When you pause, you gather information. When you gather information, you gain options. Options create control. In 2026, people who act without thinking will continue to be loud. People who think before acting will quietly advance. There's also a personal benefit to self-control that Carnegie highlighted: inner peace. When you stop reacting to every provocation, your mind becomes clearer. Your energy stops leaking into trivial conflicts. You begin to conserve attention for what actually matters. This conservation compounds. You make better decisions. You speak with more precision. You appear unshaken. Others notice. Not consciously at first, but over time patterns emerge. They trust your judgment. They seek your input. They wait for your response. All because you demonstrated mastery over yourself. Carnegie believed that the hardest person to govern is oneself, and that anyone who can do so is fit to influence others. External authority without internal control collapses under pressure. Internal control creates authority naturally. As this part comes to a close, consider this. The next time you feel the urge to react, respond, or defend, pause. Not to suppress yourself, but to choose yourself. In the next part, we'll explore how empathy, not sympathy, but understanding, allows you to influence people without force, pressure, or manipulation. For now, hold on to this. The world rewards speed, but it follows stability, and stability begins with self-control. Most people misunderstand empathy. They think it means agreeing. They think it means softening your position. They think it means absorbing someone else's emotions. Dale Carnegie meant none of that. To him, empathy was not surrender. It was positioning. It was the ability to step outside your own viewpoint long enough to understand what the other person wants, fears, and protects without abandoning your own stance. This distinction matters. Sympathy absorbs emotion. Empathy observes motivation. In 2026, this skill becomes essential because people are not just defending opinions, they're defending identity. And when identity feels threatened, logic stops working. Carnegie understood that people act from perceived self-interest, even when they believe they're acting morally. If you ignore that self-interest, you talk past them. If you understand it, you guide the outcome. This is why Carnegie emphasized beginning from the other person's point of view. Not verbally, mentally. Before speaking, ask quietly, what does this person need to protect right now? Status? Security? Control? Belonging? Once you understand that, the conversation changes. You stop pushing against resistance and start moving around it. This is not manipulation. It's realism. Every decision has an emotional driver beneath it. When you factor in how people will feel, not just what they will do, you make choices that last. Short-term wins often ignore emotional fallout. Long-term progress accounts for it. Carnegie wasn't interested in quick victories. He focused on durable outcomes. Outcomes that didn't require constant maintenance. As this part comes to a close, sit with this. You don't need to overpower people to move forward. You need to understand what moves them. Empathy is not softness. It's situational awareness. In the next part, we'll explore how consistency of character, small behaviors repeated quietly, builds trust faster than grand gestures ever will. For now, remember, when you understand the other side, you stop fighting shadows and start shaping reality. Most people believe reputation is built in big moments, public success, major decisions, visible wins. Dale Carnegie saw something quieter at work. Reputation, he observed, is shaped by patterns, not peaks. People don't trust you because of what you do once. They trust you because of what you do repeatedly. Consistency is invisible in the short term and undeniable in the long term. In 2026, this matters deeply because attention is fragmented. People notice less but remember patterns more. A single impressive act fades quickly. Consistent behavior lingers. Carnegie emphasized that character is revealed in small moments. How you treat people who can't help you, how you handle minor inconveniences, how predictable your behavior is under ordinary pressure. These moments don't feel important while they're happening, but they accumulate silently. People begin to expect certain things from you. Reliability, fairness, calm, respect. Once expectations form, trust follows. Trust is not created through promises. It's created through follow-through. Carnegie noticed that many people sabotage themselves by being inconsistent. Energetic one day, distant the next, helpful sometimes, unavailable at others. This unpredictability creates friction. Others don't know what version of you they'll encounter, so they remain guarded. Guarded people don't collaborate deeply. They keep distance. Consistency removes that distance. When people know how you'll respond, they relax. And relaxation is the foundation of trust. This doesn't mean being rigid. It means being stable in your values, tone, and treatment of others. Carnegie believed that stable character outperforms charisma over time. Charisma attracts attention. Character sustains relationships. In 2026, attention is abundant. Trust is scarce. People are surrounded by noise, opinions, and performance. What they crave, often unconsciously, is predictability without boredom. Someone who shows up the same way. Someone whose reactions aren't extreme. Someone whose word holds. Another subtle point Carnegie made: character is often tested in inconvenience. When things don't go your way, when expectations aren't met, when others make mistakes, how you respond in those moments is remembered far longer than how you behave when everything is smooth. Anyone can be pleasant when things work out. Few remain composed when they don't. Carnegie believed that restraint in inconvenience signals maturity, and maturity signals leadership. This doesn't mean ignoring problems. It means addressing them without emotional volatility. When you do that repeatedly, people start trusting you with responsibility, not because you asked for it, but because you've proven yourself capable of carrying it. Consistency also protects your self-respect. When your behavior aligns with your values day after day, you stop negotiating with yourself. That internal alignment reduces anxiety. You don't wonder who you should be in each situation. You already know. That clarity frees mental energy, and people sense it. They sense when someone is grounded in who they are instead of constantly adapting for approval. Carnegie warned against chasing intensity. Intensity feels productive, but it burns out quickly. Consistency compounds quietly. 5 minutes of composure every day does more than one dramatic moment of control. One respectful response repeated over time does more than a single grand apology. In 2026, people who last will not be the most intense. They'll be the most steady. Steady people become reference points. Others measure situations against them. How would they handle this? What would their response be? That's influence without force. As this part closes, consider this. If someone observed you for 30 days, not your words but your behavior, what patterns would they see? Those patterns are your character. And character, once established, speaks before you do. In the next part, we'll explore something closely related but distinct. How humility, not self-deprecation, but grounded realism, creates respect without lowering status. For now, remember, big moments impress briefly. Small behaviors repeated shape destiny. Stay steady. Humility is often misunderstood. People confuse it with shrinking, with staying quiet out of fear, with lowering yourself to avoid attention. Dale Carnegie meant none of that. To him, humility was not self-denial. It was self-security. A humble person is not unsure of their value. They are so sure of it that they don't need to defend it constantly. This distinction matters. In 2026, insecurity often disguises itself as confidence. Loud certainty, aggressive opinions, constant self-reference. These behaviors aren't signs of strength. They're signs of fragility trying to protect itself. True humility doesn't announce itself. It shows up as calm realism. Carnegie observed that people who constantly talk about their achievements are usually trying to convince themselves, not others. Meanwhile, people who are genuinely capable let their actions speak over time. Humility allows space. Space for others to contribute. Space for learning. Space for correction without humiliation. When someone is humble, others feel less threatened around them. And when threat disappears, collaboration becomes possible. This is why humility increases influence instead of reducing it. People don't resist humble authority. They trust it. Carnegie emphasized that admitting mistakes early is one of the fastest ways to build credibility. Most people do the opposite. They defend, deflect, or justify. Defense signals fear. Admission signals control. When you acknowledge an error without dramatizing it, you demonstrate ownership. Ownership communicates maturity, and maturity commands respect quietly. In 2026, where image management is constant, authenticity stands out sharply. People are tired of perfection. They know it's curated. What they respond to is grounded honesty, not oversharing, not self-criticism, just realism. Carnegie warned against false humility as well. Downplaying achievements excessively can feel manipulative, even if unintentionally. Statements like, "I'm probably wrong," or "I don't know much," when clearly untrue confuse people. They sense inconsistency. Humility is not denying competence. It's being comfortable with it. It's saying, "This is what I know," without attaching ego to it. Another powerful aspect of humility is openness to learning. People who believe they've already arrived stop growing. People who remain curious continue evolving. Carnegie believed curiosity was a sign of quiet confidence. You don't need to prove superiority when you're still learning. In conversations, humility sounds like genuine questions. Not traps, not tests. Real curiosity. Questions invite dialogue. Statements often end it. In leadership, humility shows up as shared credit. Acknowledging others' contributions doesn't dilute your role. It strengthens it. People support leaders who elevate them, not those who overshadow them. Carnegie noticed that people will forgive mistakes, but they rarely forgive arrogance. Arrogance closes doors silently. Humility keeps them open. It also protects you from stagnation. When you believe you have something to learn from everyone, you stay adaptable. Adaptability is one of the most valuable traits in uncertain times. In 2026, change is constant. The rigid struggle. The flexible endure. Humility enables flexibility. It allows you to update your beliefs without feeling like you've lost yourself. It separates identity from opinion. That separation is freedom. As this part nears its end, consider this. Do you feel the need to prove your intelligence? Or are you comfortable letting it be discovered? Do you defend your position reflexively? Or are you open to refining it? These answers reveal more about confidence than volume ever could. In the final part, we'll bring everything together. How these quiet principles combine into a way of moving through life that feels grounded, respected, and sustainable. For now, hold this close. Humility is not thinking less of yourself. It's thinking of yourself less often. And in that space, real strength emerges. By now, you may have noticed something. None of what you've heard is loud. None of it is dramatic. None of it promises instant transformation. And yet, taken together, these ideas form something rare. A way of moving through life that doesn't drain you. Dale Carnegie didn't teach people how to overpower the world. He taught them how to move with it without being consumed by it.